And welcome back to another episode of welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grace. And today we have a guest we're going to kind of be on the cutting edge a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about blockchain, Web3, data as a service platforms. I'm joined by James Bailey, and James is the head of business development at a company called SubQuery. If you want to follow along at home, they're at subquery.network. And they are a data as a service platform that speeds up querying and extracting blockchain data so anyone can take the data off chain and build Web3 applications of the future. Since its launch in 2021, SubQuery has raised over 10.8 million, and the platform is serving millions of Polkadot data queries daily. We'll talk about that too. We'll ask James to define what Polkadot really is. And then he's also I find this piece fascinating about James. He's also the head of business development at OnFinality, which is a SaaS platform that supports blockchain teams worldwide and provides critical infrastructure so they can focus on building the next dApp. OnFinality's API service receives about 700 million plus or minus daily API requests from blockchain developers. So if you've ever been like, what is this blockchain thing? And what are companies doing with it? James is our guy. So James, thanks for taking the time and joining us here on the podcast.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And the cool thing is James is joining us from New Zealand, where apparently they work a lot harder than we do here in the States because James
I don't know about
that. James is pulling double duty. So tell me a little bit about your story. How did you get to be the head of business development, one around, a cutting technology like blockchain, and also, of kind of two efforts at one time?
Yeah, it's a bit of a winding path, to be honest. I studied and I kind of started my career as a software developer. So I've got that development background. And over the years, I kind of shifted more into product management, which is kind of the decision of what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, how we're going to deliver it, how we're going to bring value to our customers. And what I've found making that transition from product development to business development is it's very similar. The skills that you use and require on a day-to-day basis are pretty identical, slightly different, but you're adapting different things. So for example, in product development or product management, you are trying to figure out and trying to sell an idea internally in a company. Selling your team on, we should build this next feature because from this evidence, we know it's going to change our customers' lives. And then on business development, it's more on the external sales where you're selling that same feature to a external party and how it's going to change their lives and change their business for the better. So you find that business development and product development in its core are quite similar, but there's a lot of skills around business development that you have to pick up, like how to run effective marketing strategies, how to create cycle effects that allow you to reduce the amount of time you spend manually kind of talking and acquiring each customer. So a lot of small things I've learned, but it's been a fascinating chance to learn. The reason why I got into blockchain, 5 years ago, we look around the landscape as a young software engineer and you look at what are the leading edges of software development, and it's AI, which you probably need a PhD to kind of get into and no one quite understands how it works. Or it's blockchain, where you don't really need a PhD and still no one kind of understands how it works. So blockchain was a kind of a pull for me anyway, because, there's a lot of real interesting people working on it, and it's a leading edge. And this is kind of carrying on today, right? We do a lot of work with universities like Berkeley in California, and you find that a lot of the courses, not just in software developers, but a lot of more financing types. There's a course at Berkeley called Masters of Financial Engineering, which is built to send people to hedge funds. It's the best kind of smart mathematical brains. And a lot of them are going into blockchain to work in the DeFi sectors because you can do a lot faster there, and you don't start at the bottom of this huge hedge fund. You kind of jump in at the top and start hit the ground running. So a lot of smart people joining the space, and there's a reason for that. But we can kind of go over that later in terms of what it is.
I love it. Lots of buzz, right? I think blockchain's been at, probably tip of spear for like 5 years, and people are like, blockchain. I remember when I was at Dignity Health and people were like, oh, we need blockchain for security. We need blockchain was going to solve all of our problems. It was just the answer to everything. If there was a problem, blockchain was the answer. And to your point, no one really understood what the hell it even was, but they were like, blockchain has to be the answer. What's the kind of layman's definition of blockchain, and then what's maybe the latest and greatest that's going on in that field?
So I completely agree with you. Blockchain's kind of been oversold in some ways, and one of the challenges of blockchain is it's a very new technology. It's quite a fundamental change to how we approach technology. So in its essence, a blockchain is a chain of blocks, and that chain of blocks is an amazing way to store data in a way that is decentralized. So rather than all your data, let's say your banking data, being on one server inside the Bank of America's headquarters, your data is shared across thousands of people around the world. And it's not just the storage of that data, it's also the way that that data is processed. So the rules that you operate. Blockchain's all around codifying the rules of how processes can operate so that there's no one party kind of controlling it. So a banking system is very simple. You put money into your account, you want to transfer money. There's very simple functions here. Or you want to lend and receive money, you can codify that in a blockchain very easily. And we're seeing, going back to like 2018, the last big bull cycle, a lot of DeFi, decentralized finance projects are coming through, trying to build solutions that could bring those banking tools to more people. There are hundreds of millions of people, in Africa and Asia that don't have bank accounts. That's kind of boggles the mind for us Western countries, but many people in the world don't have bank accounts because of the cost, because of the inefficiencies, and technologies like blockchain have the ability to bring that to those millions or hundreds of millions there in those countries. More recently, in the most recent bull run, you hear a lot of NFTs, right? NFTs are non-fungible tokens, which means, in short, that there's only one of a kind. And it's perfect for sharing or codifying artwork, which is what you saw this craze about in the last couple of years. But it's also applicable to other technologies like tickets. You buy an airline ticket, that's a ticket for a seat on a plane on a route at a certain time, right? Why can't you trade that ticket with someone else? When you can't make that ticket, you should be able to resell that ticket, right? You bought it. Right now, you good luck. I guess in COVID you can get refunds, but otherwise, there's no resale value for tickets, whether airline tickets or concert tickets. It's good luck. You can do something slightly illegal or against the terms of that ticket. So blockchain technology, NFTs, for example, were kind of originally thought up to solve that problem, where you get that token which represents that ticket, and you have the ability to trade or sell or hold or whatever you want to do with that ticket. It's up to you. So in short, like bringing this back, the whole thing about blockchain is it's a radical technology to store and process data and rules in a decentralized way. The outcome is really more important. So don't worry about how the technology works. Worry about the outcome. The outcome is how can we do processes in a way that's more efficient, that's more fairer, that's more transparent, and processes that we can scale and bring to people that wouldn't traditionally be served around the world.
And I love kind of your explanation of NFTs, right? Too, because I've never heard NFTs talked about in that consumer tangible kind of way. I think that's really helpful for folks to understand it.
The problem one of the biggest problems about blockchain is that there's generally like a price attached to a token or something, and so you attract the worst people that are motivated by a quick buck, and that is the worst thing about blockchain. So we see a lot of all this, these original visions are getting taken over, or get taken over every time there's a bull cycle, by people just trying to pump something that they can make money off quickly. Right. Under the hoods, there is a lot of people thinking about how this will work. I really want to be able to buy a concert ticket where I can resell that. and not get scalped by someone online. Like that's a solution that I need. So
Yeah,
there's a lot.
so many times people fall prey, right? They think it's authentic, it looks authentic, and then they get to the venue and it's not authentic and they can't go in.
And technologies like blockchain solve that. So the challenge for us as an industry right now is really where we are is like 97 in the dot-com boom, right? We're like at the cusp, or we might just be past the bubble bursting. There's a lot of, because of this craziness, there's a lot of shady people. There's a lot of people selling snake oil. Everyone in the media is laughing about pets.com, because it's just, huge valuations and it's clearly not quite there. But, let's say the bubble bursts. 20 years later, Michael, we're talking over the internet. Without the internet, our lives would be completely different today. So there's a lot of us just building behind the scenes, and we're all trying to build in a way that ignores all this hype, because everyone gets swept up in it. But now is the time to build bigger things, and so that's where we are right now. So maybe in 20 years' time, a lot of the interactions that we do will be over blockchain technologies, and rather than back in the 90s, it was a pain in the ass to access internet. Same as it's now with blockchain. Maybe in 20 years, blockchain technology will be so opaque, so like under the hood, that we don't even know we're using an application that's built on blockchain technology.
I love it. In that, when we talk about SubQuery, you guys are, again, that's a company that's kind of leveraging blockchain a little bit on the bleeding edge. Talk to me a little bit about what SubQuery offers, right? Because here's a company that has gotten funding, right? So people are interested. They believe that what SubQuery does has a value and a purpose. And then the second part to that is, talk to me about Polkadot data queries.
Yeah, sure. I'll explain some of the terms here. So this is going into more the technical side of blockchain. I'll try to explain it as simply as possible. Blockchain is a chain of blocks. It's in the name, right? And that's how we store data on a blockchain. The way that stored data is like every 10 seconds, you look around the world and you say, what's happened in the last 10 seconds? And you save that. And you save that to a chain, which kind of you can represent as like a book, okay? Every 10 seconds, a page is written in your book, okay? The problem with the way that this data is stored is it's great to share and round and guarantee consistency. You can kind of do a lot of this stuff around the saving side, but it's a terrible way to read data. Now, when was the last time you can't build an application that works off data in a book, okay? You can read a book sequentially, great. You can read the history of the Bitcoin blockchain sequentially, great. But if you want to ask a question like, give me the last 10 transactions that I've made, which is what you need if you want to build a wallet, for example. The only way you can ask that is by going through every page and looking for my account. And once I find 10, I stop. And if you don't make any transactions, that could take hours, if not days, to process, right? There's like 10 terabytes of data on Ethereum. There's a lot of data there that you don't care about. Right. So data in a blockchain is the most inefficient way to share it. And that means that building applications on blockchain is really difficult right now. It doesn't really scale. And this is why you've seen a lot of applications that are quite hard to use. They don't quite crack the user interactions, the user experience that we require for general purpose adoption. SubQuery solves that. Now, rather than having to look at data on a book, SubQuery is a tool that basically you kind of set up, you give it some rules. It's like a recipe. You say, I want this particular type of data related to my application or my program, and I want it saved in this format. And SubQuery will go off, and it's built to be to speed this up and to be optimized. It will scan every single page in history, but also when new pages are written, and it will look for that particular bit of data that you want, and it will save it into a database, which is more akin to a spreadsheet. And you can sort that, you can filter that, you can search that, you can manipulate that view, because we have optimized the hell out of spreadsheets of the last or databases of the last 20 years. So it's an open source tool that does that, and it's a tool that's used by many different application developers to build their applications, to build those user-friendly applications that we need if we want to bring the next 100 million people to blockchain. So that's really what it is in a nutshell. Now we do a lot of data indexing. It's a term called indexing, which is taking data off the chain and indexing it to a better store. And we do it for many different ecosystems. So on blockchain, the current space of the market is many different technologies. A lot of people developing different blockchains and trying to figure out and solve key technical problems right now. Okay, key technical problems that even I don't understand. But what we have right now is we have like 5 or 6, even more, but 5 or 6 kind of leading blockchain ecosystems. They're all solving different problems in slightly different ways. We're kind of testing them all out. They approach things in different ways. So, for example, you might have heard of Ethereum. Ethereum's having massive scaling problems where transaction fees are really high right now, or were really high really recently. But you have newer ones. And one of those new ones that we operate in is Polkadot. And it's an ecosystem, like a language of that blockchain. We are starting to move outside of Polkadot as well. So we're adding support for other ecosystems, because for us to really grow as an industry, we have to make sure we can connect all of these different ecosystems, build bridges between these islands, because there's no point of having, a person have an asset on one blockchain and not being able to transfer it to another one. That just doesn't make sense. So we focus on Polkadot, but we are expanding to other blockchains.
I love it. The SubQuery website, for those of you guys following at home, has some really good information, right? They have a white paper that's out there that's really good reading. There's just, I just love when people build a helpful website, right? That educates as well as advertises. It's not just like, look at our stuff. It's, hey, understand all this and then look at our stuff, right?
That's a key kind of marketing perspective, right? Like you have like different layers of marketing. The first one is like you just do features. You just talk about the features that you operate. And that's kind of like the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of marketing. The second one is you kind of talk about outcomes, this will save you time. And then the third level is that everyone's trying to get, no one kind of cracks perfectly. You have to be a real good marketer to get there, but it's all about emotions. What is the emotive responses of the outcomes that we're trying to derive? But yeah, it's hard. And that's one thing that's interesting, Michael, is in blockchain, you might have heard about this whole, like, why is everything a token?
Yeah.
Why has everyone got tokens? What's this token business? Why the hell do you bother with tokens? So blockchains are decentralized. And the way that works is that you have to incentivize people that you don't know, you've never talked to around the world, to run computing infrastructure to maintain that blockchain. And Bitcoin does this in an easy way by rewarding them proportional to the amount of computational power they put into the network, which is very simple but very inefficient, environmental catastrophes. There are new ways that avoid these environmental impacts, and we're kind of working with a lot of these chains that do that. And I won't explain that, but to incentivize these people, you've got to give them a reward. And that reward is a token, which has a fiat value to that token. So it's a tangible reward. So one of the ways, the question is, how do we design a system that will operate long after you and I both pass away and turn to dust? How do we build a financial system that will self-correct and incentivize people to continue to run computers that run the network? Okay? And that's why we have a token. The token is both it's like if you went down to Walmart, right? And every time you went to Walmart, you had to pay Walmart dollars to buy stuff. So it's both a utility. How do you access stuff inside this protocol, this network? But it's also the sum of all these tokens, these Walmart dollars, is like the market value of Walmart. Okay. So it's very important in blockchain, and this is why you keep seeing community, everyone talking about community, is that, if the utility, even if the utility is there, if the market price of your asset kind of devalues to zero, it all kind of collapses because no one gets rewarded enough to run the network, and it just doesn't quite work out. So it's really important to ensure that the community is there, the community holding that equivalent to a share, right? A stock, believes in the vision, understands the vision, shares the vision, And that's why there's such a focus on community marketing inside blockchain.
Well, and it's interesting, right? It's a great transition to talk about that because, right, communities are interesting to watch within the tech space. I was just scrolling around and I was like, ooh, you guys have a. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, not to the bottom of this topic, but to the bottom. You guys have a Discord community. Talk to me a little bit about how that serves you guys and how you guys as a company interact with your community on Discord, right? Because Discord started, I used Discord when Discord first came out, and it was to play World of Warcraft and talk with my buddies as we were on a raid and trying not to die, right? And then all of a sudden, the business community, the tech community especially, jumped onto Discord, and we're like, hey, what are all you people doing here? This is a gaming tool.
What do you guys? This is my hometown. Yeah. This was a fantastic tool, and a lot of people in crypto use it because it's a great platform where you can build a community. So if you look at communities, you can have a Twitter, and we have 55,000 Twitter followers. So we pump stuff out there all the time. It's a great kind of megaphone, but you don't get that interaction. It's quite hard to get that. And Discord is a perfect location for that interaction. Discord, you've got great moderation tools. You can put bots in there that kind of do all of the moderation and share stuff for you. But you can have all these subgroups where, for example, we have multiple people we're putting a Discord for. One is the developers using a project, so getting technical support for that. People wanting to become ambassadors of projects. There's areas for those people that just want to talk about the token and the value and what's behind it. People that just want to share memes, there's all these, you can build all these different channels for people in Discord, and you can have these different subgroups or sub areas where everyone can kind of participate. And so Discord's an amazing tool that we use. I think it's 30 or 40,000 people in our Discord. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
But it's just coming back to that community build focus. Think about blockchain and any other company, right? The CEO wouldn't really be in social media. They were just they're too busy for that. But in crypto and blockchain, you have to be reachable. Anyone can message me, and I don't get to answer everyone, but I at least scan through and at least tick a lot of those messages or just read them. And that's always having to be accessible. So it comes back to that community focus. That's why I run a Discord. It's a great way to build a community, a really large one as well, not just a small gaming guild.
Yeah. It's just funny to me, right? When you get older like me, right, to just watch the evolution from somebody that was around, probably long before you were even born, right, with dial-up and telephone lines and. I'm dating myself, but and I lived in the Bay Area where it was all happening, so it was
soundtrack to my childhood, dial-up.
And here we are with tokens and blockchain and Discord evolving, and it's really cool. How has application development kind of changed from your perspective as someone who kind of grew up traditional app dev, and now you're, in the blockchain space? How has that shifted?
It's actually remarkably the same. A lot of people think to be a blockchain developer, you have to be a rocket scientist, essentially. But there's still a lot of application development using the same tools that we use in what we call Web2, and the kind of the normal software development, building apps from React Native, iOS native applications. It's all the same. The only difference is what we call smart contracts. And smart contracts is a bit of code that you save to a blockchain, and that you say to the blockchain, execute this code whenever something happens on that chain. So it's a way that you you cast in stone a bit of code that self-manages itself and self-runs itself. And that bit of code might be as simple as allow people to create a loan and ensure that whenever they're creating a loan, they have more than that loan amount of collateral locked away in an account. Simple rules like that. So the smart contract development is still quite difficult, and it's difficult this is where I'll geek out a bit for my software developer side. It's quite difficult.
There we go.
The ways that you write smart contracts, you can't adapt or adopt normal kind of coding behaviors. There's like some gotchas or edge cases you have to avoid. So, for example, because every execution of the smart contract has a fee, by all means, at all costs, you have to avoid anything where their execution is unbounded. And a perfect example of this is a simple for loop. In coding, you make a for loop for item and lists, or for entry and entries. But you don't in blockchain, entries could be 1 million items. It could be 10. It could be every item in the blockchain, and that could just mean that you could turn bankrupt instantly. So you have to avoid at all costs things like that are unbounded, because every transaction has a cost. And so you're always designing like these like critically optimized execution coding routes that reduce the maximum possible transaction fee that you may pay for them to operate. So small things like that, which are kind of like interesting to like learn about and having to code in. But it's still software development, right? And software development, you talk to software developers, there's many different languages out there. Under the hood, it's just about effectively and efficiently explaining what process you want it to follow. The code is just the language, the language is easy to figure out. It's thinking. It's a thinking process of how you codify these things.
It's interesting, right? Because before, if you had somebody with sloppy code, right, usually it just meant like a slow response or a slow application, right?
No. Blockchain, slow smart contracts or like smart contracts that have bugs, you could lose hundreds of millions of dollars. There's not many weeks that go by where someone made a bug in a smart contract, especially like lending protocols or protocols where there's a lot of money locked away. And you see massive hacks where hundreds of millions of dollars get siphoned off. Luckily, we kind of built tools that kind of prevent anyone from laundering that money and bringing it out. So kind of a lot of these hacks end up with the hacker kind of returning everything after kind of proving things wrong, because it's kind of too hard to get money out now. But it's, there's a lot of instances where things go wrong. And so a big focus is on auditing. And we're also trying to bring in you look at how NASA have written code for like lunar landers and Martian rovers and stuff, and the amount of effort and auditing and double checks and triple checks and quadruple checks that they put into code to make sure there's no bugs. We're seeing a lot of that kind of adoption into blockchain because there's a real financial implication of if you have a bug. It's very instantaneously exploitable and very risky because it's transparent. The code is often public.
Mm-hmm. I hate bad programming, right? Whether it's on a website or in an application, to me, I'm kind of like, ooh, I like that there's a consequence, right? And that it's refined and such before it's delivered externally or put into play. There's a consequence if you're bad or sloppy. Right?
But it's irreversible. That's the downside, right? Like there's sloppy coding and everyone makes mistakes, But this whole idea that we've lived by for many years, if everyone makes mistakes, it's okay. Irreversible transactions kind of makes it a bit more sour.
You saying sorry isn't gonna get you anywhere, I guess.
It's not going to bring back that $100 million.
I love it, folks. When we were exploring blockchain, in addition to like what is it, how do we use it, what are some great use cases, people felt that it was kind of untouchable, right? Like, oh, we'll never be able to attract and pay a blockchain scientist, right? Or we'll never be able to, build machines that are capable of running blockchain. Talk a little bit about that. How is the technology accessible, right? Like, how does SubQuery maybe make it consumable or adaptable? And, everything's now kind of moving to software as a service and clouds and data as a service. Does that help companies as they try to figure out how to consume blockchain?
Yeah, it's certainly becoming a bit more mainstream in terms of it's not the untouchable, opaque technology that it was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing this a lot as well. A great symptom of this is the understanding or the willingness of our legislative bodies to reach out and start looking at it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike 5 years ago, where it was like, nope, we're banning that. Which is like you can't really ban it. It's like banning internet porn. You can't really do that. Where there's a will, there's a way. You're seeing a lot of governments out there starting to look at it seriously and saying, well, not just, okay, there's some financial implications, but, how can we embrace it from a Reserve Bank point of view, but also from the jobs that it could bring in, right? There's a tech sector out there that's humming along, and blockchain. How do we encourage some of that to build in our countries? So we're seeing a lot of that as a symptom of the growing acceptance and understanding of blockchain. I think we've got a long way to go, though. Hiring blockchain devs is still a pain in the ass, but hiring any software dev is a pain in the ass right now. There's a massive skill shortage globally. Mm-hmm. And one thing that blockchain's kind of really grown during the COVID times, like since 2019, that's when it has massively expanded as an industry. And so you're seeing a lot of these companies start remote first. And compared to other software companies that were there before, COVID, we're getting a lot of remote first blockchain companies that are able to hire globally. There's not many. There's actually less, not many at all. I talk to a lot of companies with a lot of customers around the world. And most of them, I would say 70 or 80% of them are remote first.
Wow.
So we're kind of leading in that space of, okay, let's forget about hiring in our waters or in our local 20-minute drive or 30-minute drive. Let's hire globally and work asynchronously. So there's some challenges there, but it is starting to become more accepting. And as part of just explaining, I think the main thing that we haven't done well as an industry is explaining the outcomes to the general public, right? There's a lot of nerdy developers in this space, heads down, coding away, building some pretty neat stuff that when you can ask them what they've done, they're really excited. It's a DeFi protocol that does liquidity pools to settle transactions automatically and it optimizes this. And you're like, what does that mean? We need to do a lot of effort in this space of actually explaining. So what? The so what question. Why should I give a crap about this? And so we're starting to transition to an industry where it's not just developers we're trying to hire. We're actually starting to move a lot more to the business development, the marketing, the operations, because there's a lot of companies here that have started as small 3-person development teams, built something pretty neat, starting to get a lot of users on it. But now they're like, well, how do we become a business? How are we going to how do we grow up? Mm-hmm. And so the real shortage, I think, in this industry right now is not developers specifically. There's always a shortage of developers, but it's more around the adults in the room, the grown-ups, the business people that are willing to kind of come in, learn about this new technology, learn the constraints of it, learn how things are slightly different. As I said, the community marketing part, very different from a traditional company, and figure out what works best and start running with it. Just let's give it a go. Let's build a business around it.
I love the, I think in addition, the tech people that work in tech or around tech, right? In addition to being nerdy people who geek out on cool ideas, they usually are really strong within that community, right? Of building a community. They want to talk to other people because they speak a different language, right? Almost and they want to be able, not all the time, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting these folks don't have skills to operate out in the real world as well, but they like to have people they can talk about their like the example you gave, right? Like a small amount of the population, mostly in the tech community, would be like, I know exactly what he said. That's really cool. And here's what I did when I did that, or I did something similar. And, and they just, it's crazy to watch. It's really cool. If you like, a lot of them are on Reddit too, so if you got to like Reddit, you can see all kinds of cool stuff going on with cool tech discussions and such. I love, I'm a big fan of the future of work, or FOA as I call it. And I love companies that lead with that remote first attitude, right? I just watched Elon Musk, in his edict that everybody will come back to the office or we'll fire you. I'm like, let me know how it works for you, dude. Because those people that are smart enough to work for you are smart enough to work for Microsoft, Apple, Disney, Google. They're just going to go somewhere else, and you're going to have a real talent problem on your hand.
I think Elon's trying to get rid of a percentage of his workforce. I think that's the ultimate goal here.
Yes.
The downsize.
Yeah, it's much better to issue this edict people aren't going to like, and you're going to get natural attrition, versus we're laying off 20% of Tesla. That would has a different splash in the headlines.
There's a stock price concern here.
Yeah. Web3, which we didn't really talk about. How's Web3 and blockchain kind of hand in hand?
Yeah, what the hell's Web3? Like, what do we talk about Web3? And like even the Twitter founders talking about Web5 now. But let's forget about that. Web1 is like internet back in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And this is characterized as content. Like when you go to the internet, you read someone else's content. So you might go to a website and it just shows you a ton of photos of cats, or you might read the news on the internet, right? There is a organization, or the owner of the website is generally creating the content that you consume. Mm-hmm. Okay? Web 2 is what we live in right now. Web 2 is the rise of user-generated content. So look at eyeball hours right now on the internet, and it's mostly social media. There's platforms like Reddit, and all of these share the same kind of purpose: Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn. A lot of them are social medias. A lot of the other companies do this as well, but it's the rise of when content is created by other consumers. Mm. So the internet is a platform or a place, but the content is created by other people just like you and me, and we all kind of view each other's stuff and whatever's best rises at the top, and that's what's kind of dominating the internet right now. The problem with Web 2 is that we create the content, but you might have heard that saying all the time: if you're not paying for it, you are the product. We've built these centralized services that we give our content to for free, and they use and monetize to get eyeball hours, to sell ads, and to make tremendous amounts of money. Mm-hmm. So Web3 is about, we're still in this user-generated content that's really important, but like, why are these big guys making all the money? Why are we kind of selling our souls to them? Why do we spend all our livelihoods endlessly doom scrolling on these platforms? And the whole thing about Web3 is around decentralized ownership of that data, right? So we can still live and breathe with these social media tools, but why don't we make it so that there's no one Facebook or Microsoft or Reddit that owns all this information, that reuses this and that uses it to sell stuff to us? How can we decentralize? How can we automate this social media platform so that no one benefits from it? We all kind of benefit from it. How do we make it so that the rules are transparent, so that no one can take you down because they don't like what you say? Where freedom of speech is pure, where there is no one, controlling and on building bubbles, where no one's manipulating an algorithm that right. we can't see into. We have no transparency, we have no control of, but it means that we're getting driven into our own little bubbles. It's trying to build an alternative where we remove all these negative side effects of Web 2 as it stands today. And the way that we're doing that is, as I said, that decentralization, that transparency. If we can codify the rules, and if we can all agree together around the world that these rules are good, let's build a social media that, for example, that operates under these rules. Let's do it, and let's build that so it runs. And that's really the whole premise behind Web3, is democratizing through trustless technologies like blockchain. Yeah,
I was going to say, it sounds right when you talk about Web3. It really sounds very synonymous with blockchain, right? With that
Exactly right.
decentralization. Yeah.
Blockchain's a fundamental like technology that enables. You can still do Web3 through like the traditional tools, right? It's just not purely cryptographically guaranteed to be decentralized.
Gotcha.
But you can still build a website using centralized tools that adopt those same qualities of Web3. But generally, most people synonymize Web3 with blockchain.
Awesome. So, leading just kind of your back to, I'm circling back to the close of kind of your story. What's it like, right, to be, the head of business development for a company that's young, that's kind of in the startup mode, that's on the cutting edge, that's got this geeky following of folks, I mean, that just sounds cool, right? If you grew up in that space and you're like, man, I just want to be in tech and I want to be like, it just seems like a cool story. What's it like to wake up and be James every day?
Like I like to talk to people. I'm quite a social person, so I quite like it because I talk to hundreds of customers all around the world. I'm in New Zealand, which yes, is in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of in the middle kind of side of the world, and we kind of, in fact, my quiet time of the day is generally during the middle of the day, because in the morning I'm talking to people in the States. In the afternoon I'm talking to people in Asia. And in the evening, I'm talking to people in Europe all the time. So for me, waking up, it's about how do I talk to as many customers and how do people like make this conversation here, and as efficiently as possible. And how do I break down the message to the different year groups or like age groups, right? There's like YouTube videos where it's like explained to 5 different levels, right? And it's about bringing that message to the right level. Because what we do is a very geeky developer tool, right? It's a developer tool that saves developers time. It saves them a lot of money. It makes their lives a lot easier and allows them to build a better application faster. That's really the essence of what we do as a company. We build a developer tool that saves other people time, money, and effort. And so it's really about spreading the word behind that, because a lot of people don't really realize how critical this tool is. It's such a fundamental piece of infrastructure that most teams use, and you don't really know about it. So it's about sharing how we do it and why we do that, but in a way that people understand the outcome rather than pure technology focus.
I love it. James, you've covered a bunch here, right? Which is it's just super helpful. It's a great, I think, you've done a great job really breaking down what blockchain is and how it's used with some real use cases. We've talked about Web3, which is very cool, and how it's related. We've talked about SubQuery, which again is out at subquery.network for you to check out the white paper. They've also got some use cases that I thought were kind of interesting, right? The actual featured projects where you can dive in and see specifically how. So if you're like, I still don't really understand it, white paper, great place. The actual use cases are always good. I always find like, oh, I think it could maybe be deployed like this. And then you go out and you read about it and you go, oh, okay, now I understand it, right? Sometimes that practical application creates the missing link in knowledge. The one that I plan to read is there's one out there for zombies.world. And I'm like, I don't know. It's got a really cool graphic of a zombie.
Yeah. It's an NFT platform of like zombies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they use it to, like, they build a UI, a marketplace where you can trade and like bid on zombies, on their zombies, sorry. And they basically use SubQuery to collect and analyze all the bids and show that in the UI. So if you want to see like the bidding history, the sales history of all these zombies, you can.
That's very cool. So SubQuery is all about supporting the zombies.
Well, yeah, and the best thing about that website is what we call the Explorer. There's a big drive in blockchain. Again, it's the open source movement that started it all. It's this decentralized, transparent, everyone's fair and equitable. So open source is a big thing. It's a big way that, it's a big manifestation of that vision. And it means that we can show off all the different projects using ours because we can, everyone's kind of open source. We can collect them all into that UI. We can say, look, these are what people are building. This is how they're building it. This is their code base even. And this is what you could then maybe take and transfer across to your own application if you want to do something similar, but just slightly different, go for it. Feel free.
Yeah, it's very cool. So again, lots of information out there. If you want to find out more, if you want to get a hold of James, all that can be done through SubQuery .network is a great place to start. So James, thank you for taking the time, breaking it all down on the cutting edge. Very cool. Telling a little bit about your personal story. Also much appreciated.
Yeah, it was a pleasure joining today, Michael, and I hope we all learned something.
All right.